It goes back to the definition, and it really is it's about influence and impact. And, some of the best leaders I know have huge influence and impact on me without any title, whether it's just showing up with a, positive comment. You can be a leader. You can own what you're doing that's on your plate today and have greater impact and influence.
Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for today's leaders who want to get ahead and stay ahead, because we believe great leaders aren't born or made, they're always in the making. I'm your host, Damon Lemby, two-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people. I'm joined today by Tim Lupinacci. Tim is the chairman and CEO of Baker Donaldson, one of the 100 largest law firms in the nation, and he's got a great new book out, and it's called Everybody Leads and Why It Matters. And it's one of the best business books I've read on leadership in quite a while. It's very relatable, and I love his vulnerability. And early on in the book, Tim shares a $1 million mistake he made early on in his career. In our conversation, we're going to do a deep dive into Tim's book, and we're going to talk about what leadership looks like and how it starts with yourself. I'm going to ask Tim to share, what does it mean to be a leader? How do you get better at leadership every single day? And what does that mean for the people around you and the team that you lead? So Tim, take us back to the time where you had that huge mistake early on in your legal career and you thought to yourself, man, I'm done. But it ended up turning out to be basically everything for you.
Yeah, Damon, I really, I jokingly say I stumbled into law school because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had taken a class in undergrad that had something to do with law because I was a mass comm major and it was media law, First Amendment. It seemed pretty interesting to me. So I ended up taking the entrance exam. I'm in law school and I did okay and I get a job. So I'm working at this big firm and I didn't really know anything about the actual practice of law. I didn't have anyone in my, sphere of influence who was an attorney who could help me and mentor me. So I was very transactional in how I was approaching my day to day. I'd come in, I'd do a project, I'd turn it in, go to the next project and forget about it and go home at night. Right. And, about a year in, I was working for, one of those type of bosses who were pretty, gruff, big yeller, didn't give you a lot of feedback. You didn't know where you stood with him. And I worked on a really big project in advance of a big hearing, a lot of financial numbers, and I turned it into him and I went on my way. Didn't even think about it until I heard my name being paged over the intercom, which I'm not even sure people do that anymore, but they, my name's being paged to go to Bob's office. And I knew you never wanted to get paged to Bob's office. And so I go to his office. I'm a little bit worried about why he's calling me. And as I get to his office, I hear a lot of yelling coming out of the office. The door was wide open and I walk in and I learn on a speakerphone with about a dozen lawyers from around the country and they're yelling at him and he's yelling at them. And then I pick up that they're all yelling about the project I had done and I'd completely messed up the calculations. I overcounted claims in a bankruptcy case by about $2 or $3 million. And it really had a big impact for this hearing the next day. So I immediately, thinking, okay, I'm going to lose my job here. What's going on? And Bob's yelling at them. And then he says, this idiot's going to stay here all night to fix it if it's the last thing that gets done. So I did spend a lot of the night there. I got it sent out to everyone. And they all said, yeah, this is the right calculations. And the next morning, I had drawn the short straw to drive Bob to the court hearing. It was about 90 minutes south of here. So we're driving along the interstate and it's pretty awkward silence for a while. But then he did step up and he said, I want to apologize, Tim, because I shouldn't have yelled at you in front of other people. But he said, the reason I did was I was so aggravated with you because I really think you have huge opportunity to have a very successful career. But you need to own your career. You need to step up and be a leader in everything you're doing and not just expect that someone else is going to fix your problems down the road. And that really, Damon, was the first time I remember someone really speaking into me about you're a leader and being a leader. And so that made me think, well, wow, what does that mean to be a leader? And then how can I get better at it? Once I realized after the hearing went fine and I didn't get fired that I've got to figure out what to do about this. So it really led me on this lifelong journey of reading and studying and trying to figure out what does it mean to be a leader and how to get better at it.
So thinking back to that situation with Bob where he called you an idiot, which by the way, as a ex-D1 baseball player, I mean, that was just common language you got, back in our day.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But I'm sure that you've been in situations like that now as CEO and chairman of Baker Donaldson, right? And where people have made big mistakes like that. And how have you learned from that and handled it differently?
Yeah, no, it is. That's a great question, Damon, because it's like I've ultimately learned a whole lot from Bob about leadership, about how to approach the practice, even some life lessons. He became a very significant mentor in my life. And so, it's funny because you take some of the things like I learned from Bob and try to implement and make it kind of how I want to approach things. But then I learned some other ways that I approached it. I think it really, for me, it starts with the fact that I've made so many mistakes along the way that, my approach, even when I'm doing that, is to try to build that resilience muscle. Like, okay, how did this happen? Why did this mistake happen? Try to understand it. And then what am I going to do about it? Like, what's the action plan? And some of that comes with the practice of law, which is, I was the bankruptcy lawyer and you have a lot of court hearings and you didn't win them all. And you come back and like, what am I going to tell the client? Well, okay, here's what happened. Here's why it happened. But here's what we can do as the action plan. So I think that way that I've tried to approach the mistakes that I make day in and day out and admit them and try to learn from them is kind of how I approach people here at the firm. I mean, when I was leading a team of practicing lawyers, like in the trenches with our clients, it'd be kind of that approach. And even now, I mean, I really work hard that we've built, that old Jim Collins, have the A players and the right seats on the bus. And I feel like we've got the right leadership team at the firm, and we're all going to make mistakes. And so when they do, it's trying to unpack it, understand it, and maybe it wasn't as big a mistake as the person feels it is. But then what can we learn from it, and how can we go forward? What do we do now? And I'm not perfect. I can get aggravated and stuff, but although I'm not much of a yeller, that's just something I never really adopted that trait. But that's kind of how I've approached it with others, because that's kind of showing a little bit of grace on myself. You got to show a little bit of grace on others, but we got to fix it to move forward.
Got to fix it to move forward. And I can't wait to get into your book, Everybody Leads. But talk to us a little bit about your journey up to where you're at now as CEO and chairman of the board, right?
Yeah. But it was interesting because I was spending that early time in my career learning about leadership, learning how to be a lawyer and all of that, learning how to interact with clients. And then ultimately, the clients relying on me for advice. But along the way, as I got more seniority, then I would have a young lawyer working for me, and I would have, let's say, like a paralegal working for me. And I vividly remember, like in the late 90s, there was like a team of 3 of us that was handling a bunch of these matters. And so I was trying to think, well, how can I pour into them? How can I help them grow? And literally, we just scheduled a weekly coffee break for 30 minutes, and we just got in a conference room. And we talked about the matters we were handling, but also started talking about leadership. And one of the things I realized that I wanted to keep learning too was, why don't I invite senior leaders from that firm I was at in to come and talk about their journey, talk about what they learned, how do they lead their teams. It was going to help me get better, but it was also going to help them. And that was really the first step I really thought about. Well, okay, I like this idea of teams and building something. And then ultimately went to another law firm to try to help build their bankruptcy practice. And we did that. And then I joined Baker Donaldson, and with a team of 2 or 3 lawyers and a paralegal, and we're doing our thing. And then I got the opportunity to lead the Birmingham office, which was about 120 people. And it wasn't something I sought out. It was just, okay, well, let's try to do this. And I love that idea of let's come up with a vision together and let's go conquer the city. Let's go conquer the brand, in Birmingham and who we are. And that really got me fired up. But I also love practicing law. So I'm doing that. Ultimately, that led me to lead a practice group, which was lawyers around the firm instead of just in Birmingham, that were in the bankruptcy financial services area. And ultimately, leading the department, we built a whole department around representing banks and financial institutions. And so that was where I was sitting until 6 years ago when I got selected to be the CEO and the chair. And that whole process was interesting too. But anyway, that's kind of a short version of how I got from Bob's office being yelled at to now leading a large firm.
When the idea came in to put you as to move into the CEO role, did you deal with any imposter syndrome?
Oh, all the time. Matter of fact, even and I still struggle with that some. But so at our firm, and it's going to be different in different organizations, our board selects the CEO and chair. I know some, particularly in professional services, they may have a firm-wide vote, things like that. But so our board was going to make the selection, and my predecessor had been in the role for 20 years. So he talked to the board members and said, who are viable candidates that you would consider to replace me? And so I was one of the names that had come up with several others. And he came and said, hey, do you want to be considered? And as I said, I really love practicing law and love my clients and love bankruptcy is a lot of fixing things. That's what I loved more than necessarily going to court. I love trying to, nobody's happy. Let's see if we can get a resolution together. So I initially said, no, I think I'm going to keep practicing law. And then like this little internal voice was, nagging me for a couple of weeks about, well, why don't you just try? I mean, you love this firm, you love leadership. So that went into the process of then going through, and it was a pretty laborious process, but was really gratified and honored to be selected. And then there was a 6-month transition. But yeah, I think most leaders, at least myself, I guess I can talk about myself. I'm one of these leaders. I like feedback. I like to have dialogue about things, and then I know I need to then act on things. But then I just always have this little voice that people are going to realize I don't know what I'm doing, and then particularly if you make mistakes, you get that as oh man, you made that huge mistake. You kind of missed this last year. What makes you think you're going to do any better this year? And so one of the things, and I don't think we've talked about this, but one of the things that really helped me is there's an author named John Acuff who talks about we have these soundtracks in our heads. And how do we flip the script on the soundtrack? And rather than let those negative voices talk to us, what are some of the positive things? Like what are some real accomplishments we've accomplished? Or even it could be just some phrase to help you get motivated for the day. And so I think that's something that's really helped. But I still struggle with that. Which is interesting because like as a leader, you can have success, you can be humble about it, but then it just feels like so much more to learn. I got to keep learning to try to keep getting better. So.
Well, I really appreciate that you share that. For our listeners, I mean, Tim isn't the CEO of a small boutique firm. It's one of the top 100 in the nation, and I just think it's amazing that you're humble enough and vulnerable enough to share that. And I think that that's so important because I don't care who you are and how high up you get up the ladder, we all deal with imposter syndrome, and we have those limiting beliefs and voices that come into our mind. And but we just got to fight through them. So, and if you say you don't, you're either a sociopath or you're just not being honest with yourself.
Right.
So let's go. No, go ahetd.
I'm sorry, Damon. It was interesting because I was in a discussion yesterday with an attorney who's at another firm thinking about whether they want to join us, and it was interesting because he was talking about how the leaders of their firm, never have shown up at their office. They're spread out, kind of like we are, and never show up at their office, and also come into like meetings, town halls with a script, and then they shut it off before any questions. And I was like, that's so contrary to what we do because we want to get better. We want to answer questions. We want to be transparent. Now, I'm not saying like I said, we're not perfect, but I think that approach that you were just describing, Damon, also enables your people who are a part of your team to want to feel more that they have a value, that they have a purpose, that they're trying to help you accomplish great things because they do have that voice. They have an ability to ask questions. And so I think it really helps organizations to have that kind of approach in leadership.
I mean, think about it for a second. The partners come in, first of all, you never see them, right? Yeah. And they come in with a script and they won't answer any questions. What type of environment is that creating? What kind of culture? Where on the flip side, yeah, I'm with you. I want feedback. I want to learn and grow and get better as an organization and build up the people around us. Because like what you talk about a lot in your book and the work you do is connecting the dots with purpose and belief and how that drives everything. So let's jump into your book, Everybody Leads. What inspired you to write it? How long did it take? And how's everything going?
Yeah, well, I guess you could argue or say that is my whole lifetime how long it took me to write it, right? But it really did start that idea with Bob yelling at me and me figuring out how do I become a better leader, and now putting these ideas into practice. And I do love reading, so I read a lot of books, and a lot of the books you read in management and business, it's a lot of theoretical things, a lot of ideas that, well documented, well researched. But then what I try to do is take one or two things from everything I read and how can I apply that at Baker Donaldson or apply that in my own life and make that work for me. And so really the idea was, how can I take some of these things that have worked well at Baker Donaldson and on my journey here, and around storytelling. So I think I get interested when I read stories and make stuff very practical. And really the whole arch of it is I want to just make sure that everyone has the confidence that you are a leader, and you do impact and influence others, whether you have a fancy title or not, right? Whether you have a corner office, and that you can, in your community, in your family, in your business, you can impact and influence others. And then that drives, like you were saying, Damon, purpose, and it really can drive you feeling more a part of that organization or that team, and get more fulfillment in what you're doing day in and day out. So that was kind of the arc of like why I put this together. Hopefully, there's some words in there that will encourage someone, inspire someone, maybe like I've been inspired along my journey. So that what started me writing it. I mean, I probably started writing some of the stories and some of the ideas around COVID timeframe. We were doing when COVID, pandemic hit. We, like everyone, started working from home, and we ended up doing daily videos, like 3 or 4 minute videos. A lot of it was just information, like, hey, the laptops are going to be shipped to your home if you don't have one, and here's the Wi-Fi, and here's the stuff we're doing. But then we ultimately just kept doing them with like updates, and I started doing occasionally. I do like a encouraging, inspiring message about like, we can keep doing this. Let's, we're doing great. We're serving our clients, and all that. So some of the stories I started doing there, playing around with some ideas of what can we do to be resilient in a uncertainty. But really started writing in 2021. So it took about 4 years to get it. Probably took about 3 years, and then the whole editing process and getting it, ready to launch. So, so it's been a long process.
Did you learn anything about yourself along that journey, whether personally or as a leader?
Yeah, well, certainly as I'm trying to refine, these stories or these ideas, to really step back and think about, okay, well, that did work then, or this didn't work then, but how's that impact me today? And particularly now, as I talk about some of the content in the book, it's like, oh yeah, I really haven't been expressing gratitude as much as I've seen how valuable that is to others. And I talk about it, as a real discipline of how I try to lead. I really haven't been doing that as much lately. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those that just, I jokingly say that, if it feels like reading the book or, whatever, I'm pointing a finger at you to do something. I've got 3 fingers pointed back at me saying, no, you need to do this, and step up and do it. So, and as you know, I mean, you've written book. I mean, it tends to boomerang back on me on how I can get better, even my own words.
No, absolutely. I had somebody once tell me that us authors, us leadership authors, these books we write, we should be writing them for ourselves. Yeah. And that was one of the things that I really enjoyed when I wrote The Learn It All Leader was, I talk about all this stuff and I had these stories, but am I actually putting them into practice? And how can I get more intentional and consistent with it? Which I think is so cool. And I also, everybody leads. And what I think is great about that is my book, The Learn It All Leader. Well, some people say, well, I'm not a leader, so it doesn't apply to me. And I always say, that's not true. What is your definition of a leader?
Well, it's funny you say that, Damon, because I was when it was still being edited and not put out into, haven't published it yet. I was with a group of guys, and one of them's a very successful leader for about 40 years of a company in the Carolinas, and we were I literally just met him, and we were talking, and somehow the idea of a book came up, and the book I was working on. He said, "Everybody leads. That's not true. You got to have followers to accomplish anything." And I said, "Yeah, but which is what you do. I mean, you need the team to get. I mean, the only reason we're successful as a firm is because we have 1,400 people that are kind of really all stepping up in their area, right, and thriving. But it goes back to the definition, and it really is it's about influence and impact. And some of the best leaders I know have huge influence and impact on me without any title. Whether it's just showing up with a positive comment, or like I talk in the book about one of our colleagues in Baltimore who was a receptionist, but she owns that reception area, and somebody shows up who has a problem or has a concern, or there's an issue with one of the conference rooms, she's going to fix it, even if it's not in her job description of just answering the phone, right? And so she's influencing that office for the good. And ultimately, since writing the book, she's gotten promotions because she has expanded her influence. And so people wanted to have her in a higher level of responsibility. And so no matter where you are, when I was that young lawyer that Bob told to be a leader, I was a first year attorney having no clue about what it meant to be an attorney of a firm, about 80 or 90 lawyers. And I couldn't even, buy a paper clip, without somebody else authorizing it. But yet he was telling me, you can be a leader. You can own what you're doing that's on your plate today and have greater impact and influence. It's interesting. I mentioned earlier that we, our COO and I have been doing a summer road trip to all of our offices and doing some presentations, walking the halls and seeing people. And one of the things we've talked, one of our themes this year is really about how can each person own their impact. It kind of does build on this. If I've got impact, which everyone does, how can I own it? How can I show up every day getting better at it? And I read something of this old Roman phrase called anteambolo. And even though my name's Italian, I'm sure I just botched that in saying it Italian. But anteambolo apparently back in ancient Rome meant one who clears the path for others. And to me, that's what leadership is. If we can help clear the path for somebody else, help them accomplish their dream or overcome an obstacle, or just listen to them when they're having a no good, horrible, bad day, that's helping them along their journey. And that is leadership, whether you've got some big fancy title. To Tim, anyway.
Well, I'm with you, because here at the end of the day, it's not about your title or your corner office. And I mean, there's studies that show that if you're leading by formal authority, that is literally the weakest way to go about things. Where on the flip side, the biggest impact you could have is through influence, is through showing up. And what I heard you just say too is like somebody who just jumps in, says, hey, raises their hand and I'll help you fix the problem.
Right.
You know? And so I think that's so important. I love how you start off in your book. Literally, I think it's chapter number 2 is around curiosity. So what role does curiosity play? Well, first of all, your book is broken into, first you got to lead yourself and then leading a team. So let's start off with how you lead yourself and curiosity.
Yeah. Well, so that really grew out of like the challenge from Bob. How can I be a leader? What does that mean? And then I just literally went to the bookstore and bought, I think at the time that John Maxwell book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership was on the bestseller list. And I just started reading it, which then got me more curious about, what does this mean and how can this apply in my daily life? And that really led me to do things like, I think I talk in the book about turning my Camry, which is what I was driving at the time, into like a mobile university where I would listen to books on tape, which I know nobody knows what tape is anymore, but used to have cassette tapes of books, right? Now you can listen to Audible or podcasts and all that. But I just wanted to learn and to grow and get better. I always have felt like, I don't know why this is.
Have you always been that way though? Have you ever always been a leadership junkie or what?
Well, since then, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I just started, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, I think, back then when that challenge came in, it got me really launched on this idea of curiosity. I think before that, I hadn't really thought about it much, frankly. And I think it's just one of those, I've never felt like, I don't know why. I mean, we've moved around a lot. I probably should work through this with my therapist, but I've always felt like I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, right? Like I'm behind a little bit on needing to, learn and to grow and to know more. And so I said, well, I'm just going to keep investing in myself. Right. And, so I think that, and then that muscle, I think, just grows because like now I'm a vociferous reader. I love to read. It's kind of my hobby. But to also see how it can apply to my life, and again, I mean, you can read, people take lists of, they read 100 books a year, but they can't remember any of them. I try to really get practical about what are a couple, 3 things I can learn from that book, and apply it. So I guess it just kind of been fostered by seeing how it helped me along my journey to just be curious. And, I love, people. And so I love interacting with people and asking them about their journey. And then that's helping me to learn about how I can get better.
I mean, I have a solo episode on my podcast that's about, reading, and it's about applying what you read, because exactly what you said. And I think this is important for our listeners out there, whether you're reading Tim's book, reading my book, taking classes, whatever it is you're doing, you need to tie it back to something that you're working with, either personally or professionally. Otherwise, you won't remember anything. Yeah. What advice do you have or practical tips do you have for somebody to become more curious?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny when you were saying that, Damon, about picking the tips out of a book. And the thing I find, and I'm sure you find the same way, that I don't just get these tips out of like business books either. Certainly biographies of great leaders. I mean, there's so much great stuff there. But even I'm listening to a fiction book right now, and there was some phrase that they talked about creativity and art. And I was like, wow, that is a powerful phrase. So I had to I was listening to it on Audible driving. So I had to stop it till I got parked that I could write that down and really think about that. So I think it's, any book. I literally just would say some of the one of the biggest things I think people struggle with, like, and even how am I going to get more curious, is I don't have the time to spend to be more curious. That's great. You have time to read books. I've got small kids. I've got 2 jobs. I've got whatever that I just can't do that. And so I think some of the basic tips are, I like these. I'm really thinking a lot about these ideas of like micro resilience or even micro curiosity, like 10 or 15 minutes of reading a book every day that can help you along your journey. That's going to build that curiosity and it's going to get you going. And before you know it, it might be 30 minutes a day or, an hour every week or whatever. And the other thing is too, we could talk about this. I talk in the book about, whatever they call it, the weapons of mass distraction, scrolling and all that stuff that we all do.
Netflix.
Netflix. I was flying home last night and I was sitting in a, airport and I just realized for 30 minutes, I'm just scrolling through stuff that really, I've got this book I could be reading. Right. So some of it is how do you, use your time, but I just want to say like real short, like 10, 15 minutes a day. One of the things I started several years ago was I got curious about Stoicism. I'd heard a lot of people talk about that, and
Marcus Aurelius.
Ryan Holiday's written a lot of books about that, and he's got like a daily Stoic, and it doesn't take you like 5 minutes, 6 minutes to read that, and it has some ideas and like putting you in. So like that's a great place to start, to be curious. Not saying that all the Stoics had it all right. I'm not saying, but there's some things that are really thought provoking about how they approach life and what's in your control. 5-10 minutes a day can start building that curiosity muscle. So that's how I've done it.
Well, you answered my question for me, because what the question was going to be, how does somebody who leads a 1,000-person company find time to learn? And I say the same thing, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. I love it when people tell me they don't have time. And then 5 minutes later, I'll ask them, have you seen any good shows on Netflix? And they'll tell me 4 or 5 shows. Right. So it gets into another thing that you talk early in your book about, is the importance of being consistent and having discipline when it comes to self-mastery and leading yourself.
Yeah, I talk a lot about I've got my daily disciplines that I try to go through every day. And some people say, well, that seems pretty rigid, but I've gotten to a point where it works for me on the things I'm trying to accomplish and the things I'm trying to do and leading. But it's not 5 hours a day. It's literally, I try to read every morning. I try to get outside and walk or run. I love being outside in nature. And when I'm walking or running, either, prayer or meditation, whatever works for you. I try to journal every day. In the last 6 months or so, I've really taken the journaling into this idea of thinking about what are 3 wins that I want to have today. And what are 3 mistakes? And then going at the end of the day, think about, what are 3 wins that I had today? What are 3 mistakes I've made today that I can get better at? And then what are 3 wins I'm going to try to have tomorrow? So like last night, I was thinking about our discussion, Damon. It's like, I want to show up engaged and full of energy and just really learn from Damon and show up. That's one of the wins for today, right? I mean, that I've thought about. And I'm not talking about you name it and you claim it and all that stuff. But so I've started doing that. That helps me to kind of frame the next day and to think about the day that just ended. But so that takes 5 minutes at night to do that. Try to really work on the sleep, going to bed early, getting up early. I mean, whatever works for you, but making sure I'm getting into good enough sleep. Trying to eat healthy. I mean, those things that I try to do consistently day in and day out. And I realize when I don't get to do all that, it throws me off for the day. It doesn't mean I'm going to have a horrible day, but I just realize I'm not fully engaged, not fully there if I haven't been able to do some of that each day. And then I have some weekly rhythms. Like I try to get off of the iPhone for 24 hours each weekend. I kind of call it my digital Sabbath. Now the executive team knows they can text me. I keep the text sound on. So if I hear a text, I'm going to go check in case somebody needs something emergency. But I try to, like, from Saturday 5 o'clock, Sunday 5 o'clock at night, I try to just disconnect to be with family or do some personal reading or just, hang out with friends to make sure I'm doing it every week. Now, do some of that during the week too, certainly.
Well, it's tough, and we're not perfect, right? So you set this up, and sometimes you fail, but you just got to get right back up and do it. For me, I'm a big fan of Michael Hyatt. I don't know if you read his work, but he's got the big 3. Yeah. And so I come in every morning with the 3 things I want to accomplish for the day, the big 3. I do it for the week, quarter of the month. And when I stick to it, I just feel much better about myself, and much more organized. Do I do it all the time? No, but that's part of my game plan to do it. And I think it's great. Now, also, you talk a lot about, or you mentioned, what are the 4 traits that the best leaders across the board typically seem to have?
Yeah, it's interesting. That goes back to that book Leadership Challenge. It's been around for like 30 years or whatever. Puzis and Kozner, I think, and they've done research. And every year, I think they go out and they ask people literally around the globe, what are the most admired leadership traits of the leaders that you have, you follow, or the ones you most inspire you. And they claim that over 30 years, I mean, it's been the same top 4. Now, you can go Google best leadership characteristics, and there's going to be hundreds of them. And I do think there's a whole part of leadership that you really have to think about. What are your North Star values? What do you want to live out? And how do you, and then how are you doing it? How are you doing in doing it? Like, are you really, you say it, but are you living it out? But they talk about 4 things that most people want to see in their leaders are, first of all, honesty, somebody they can trust, which makes sense. They want someone who's competent, which also makes sense. I mean, you don't want, somebody doesn't really know what they're doing leading. So you have to have competency. They want someone, I'm sorry. Yeah,
no, that's table stakes.
Yeah, that's table stakes. They want someone who's forward thinking, which is interesting because I know not everyone necessarily is a big visionary or whatever. I do have that muscle. I love looking ahead and trying to think about big things. But they want someone that can help them help describe the desired future that you want to accomplish as a team or as an organization and how we're going to get there. And then the 4th one is inspiring, someone who's inspiring. And I think that's a little bit different than being a visionary necessarily, because they want in the day-to-day trenches, they want someone who's inspiring, that they get me, they know me, they've got that authentic relationship that they can really get me fired up to try to go do things that I maybe don't think I can do. And so those are things that, again, I think we all have to, there's so many great leadership characteristics that I know you've talked about, you've written about, I could talk about, but those are 4 that are kind of like over decades have been really viewed as something that's important. So if you're really trying to figure out, well, where do I start? That would be a good place to start, be thinking about how can I make sure that I'm being honest, and how can I make sure I'm being the best that I can be, showing up every day in whatever role I have right now, and being inspiring and encouraging others. I think that's going to really help you in the long run. In
your book, do you give any practical tips for your leaders on how they can find their North Star values?
Yeah, I think and these are some things that I've learned from others, but I typically will try to get online and find a list of, like I said, you can find 50, 60, 80 different North Star value traits, leadership traits, and then sit down and think about going through the list. And there's not really anything on there that's wrong or that's right. It's just how do you want to show up in your leadership? And then go through and identify the top 3 or 4 that you really want to try to live out, that you really aspire to be, and then try to live it out. I mean, let those be your guiding force. Like I know humility is one of them. Being a servant leader is one. Being authentic, being a listener, being someone who's really focused on listening and not just trying to get to the next statement that you want to make in response, right? So let's say those are the traits that you say, this is what I want to aspire to be. Well, then just check yourself. See, how are you doing? Are you showing up with those type of values day in and day out? We're all going to make mistakes. There's going to be days when you're not going to be patient, if patience is something you're really trying to aspire, but really to work on it and think about it. And then one thing that a friend of mine told me that he does this because he travels a lot like I do. On your iPhone, there's a compass. And he says he lands in a new city and he tries to figure out where's true north. Right. And then he does the compass, and then he feels like, if I know that's true north that way, I kind of feel like I'm settled. I know I can lead. And so if you've got some leadership values, and you're in the busyness and the whirlwind of every day, and you get to the end of a really busy day, go back to your true north and say, hey, did I really live out these values today? What is true north? And so those are some things I do now. It's interesting because values can change over time. Because there may be different things you're working on, different things you're trying to accomplish. You may have a bigger role that means you have to be more shown up in a different area. So those are some things I've done.
Well, here's a curveball for you. Going back to being a forward-thinking leader, a visionary, have you experimented at all with AI to help test your assumptions or help prompt and get you more creative and build ideas?
It's a great question, Damon. And we're, as an organization, we're certainly looking at that. We're looking at how we can better serve our clients. It's an interesting in the legal profession because we've got ethical obligations that we can't let our, client confidence get out into the world. And there's a lot of AI tools out there that don't have that kind of protection, right? That it just gets out there. So we're having to work on that. But I have started, we're about to engage. We're in the middle of what we call Baker Vision 2028, a strategic plan that will run through 2028. And but we know we can't get to it'll end January 31st, 2028. We know February 1st, 28. We can't just say, okay, we don't have a strategy. We have to start thinking ahead. And so I'm putting together a strategic committee to start thinking about that. And I had a list of ideas of things. Well, these are some big rocks that we want to think about for the future, like AI, like how are we going to best use that for our clients? But I literally went into, I think it was Copilot and said, what are the, top 10 things that law firms in the United States need to be thinking about strategically to prepare to serve clients in 2030 and beyond? Something like that as a prompt. And it spit out 10 things. Some of them were on my list. Some I hadn't thought about that I was able to then modify a little bit what we think our strategic committee is going to be looking at. And it's still a work in process, but that's a way that I've tried to use that. Now, I know some people, I don't like to use it to draft things for me just because I like, not that I like my words so much, but I just like the tone. I want to come across as like authentic. But I have used it to think about, there was another one where we're, thinking of some things for a leader meeting coming up, and we have a certain broad topics. And I said, well, within these broad topics, what would be some questions that some of our leaders may have about this? And it gave me a list of things that then helped inform us to then build out an agenda. So, yeah, it's powerful stuff.
It's powerful stuff, and I love how with your organization you're thinking about becoming AI ready and I think it's part of your plan. And I think you call it, isn't it like leading in between? Is that kind of like
about? I do talk in there a little bit in the book about that because really it started the concept around strategic planning because we launched this big strategy, big hairy audacious goals a couple of years ago, and everyone's excited. We're at a retreat, rah, let's go. And then when we get close to the end of January 31st, 28, I think people will be ready to run through the finish line. But then how do you keep people engaged and motivated in the 2 or 3 years in between, right? And so we've tried to do some things to same going back to very first question about learning and growing. What are the lessons we learned from the first year of the vision, things that are working, things that aren't working, and then have a like sort of an approach or a theme for that year that can keep executing on the things that are going well, but tweak it a little bit. So after the first year, we had all kinds of momentum, had a lot of things going well in the measurements we'd put in place. So year 2, we just said, okay, we want to double down for greater impact this year. These principles are working. Let's double down. Well, when we came around to this year, we saw that a lot of people were kind of stepping up, executing on some of the vision principles, but it wasn't all the way through the firm. So this year we kind of had, okay, well, how do we get everyone to really personalize this? So our theme this year is own your impact. And I love acronyms. So the impact is, different things we want them to own this year. The P is purpose. The C is building community. T is teamwork, things like that. And accountability is the A. How do we each own that day in and day out? So during the in-between, when you can get lost and it can get hard and you can say, lose sight of the vision, we're trying to keep people focused that way. But I've also heard, it's also applicable if you feel like, you maybe between jobs or you're not sure what your big ambition is, or maybe you've accomplished something, what's next? I think some of those ideas still can be important to sit back and think about, what can I learn from the past and how can I drive forward, even if it feels a little bit like I'm in the desert right now.
How do you cascade that message throughout such a large organization? Owning your impact. No, that's fantastic. You can sit around at a leadership retreat with you and your top advisors or your group, but how do you get it to Gloria as a receptionist or Tim in accounting? How does that happen?
Yeah, there's a couple things. So it goes all the way back to when we started, because, as you know, Damon, a lot of companies will have their new strategy and then it gets put on the shelf and they don't do anything with it. And then 5 years later, we need to do something around a strategy again, right? We built out a whole strategy charter about how you take, sort of the firm ideas, the firm vision, you bring it down and make sure it's kind of like on a circle. And you think about the arrow going around the circle. We have to communicate that and get all our group leaders. We have, like business units, we call it department heads, and we have practice leaders, but you can just think of any company, just whatever business units. You have to get the group leaders of those business units to understand it, to get passionate, to have buy-in with it. And then the circle comes around and each individual has to own it. And then if we're doing that, then it's going to come back around and it's going to help the firm be successful. So it's kind of like that flywheel, right? So we definitely built out a charter that then is spread down all the way to not just the lawyer leaders, but also our business services professionals and staff. And so that's kind of the first approach. But then day in and day out, we talk about it all the time. We have this acronym. We have our vision statement and the statement and the PowerPoint slide on how to own your impact. That before every meeting, leaders are supposed to show that and go through it, talk about how it, tell the story of Baker Vision, tell the story of how people are owning their impact in each meeting. And then we have town hall meetings. I mentioned our COO and I being in every office. We did 2 town halls each day of every office and talked a lot about how can you individually own your impact. And we had individuals tell the story of how they're owning their impact, whether they had a title or not. So it's a constant message. One of my friends said that, you in communication, you communicate till you're sick of it and blue in the face from talking so much. And then you're about halfway there because, we can't just have to keep communicating. So we try to keep it front and center. But the biggest thing, you're telling the stories of success because it's not a Tim vision. Our vision's built on what our clients want. And so we just say, look, this is working. People who are executing this, their careers are thriving. You can do it too. We're going to give you the resources to do it. And so we just keep it front and center in how we do it.
I mean, it really goes back a lot to what you talk about in your book. Some of the core themes are consistency, being intentional, and storytelling, and getting it out there through the voice of your customers and getting people to buy in for the purpose. But I'm a little all over the place, but there's so many cool, little terms and things you have in your book. Another one I really liked that maybe I'd like you to share is leadership aroma.
Yeah. When you were talking earlier, Damon, about the things that I learned the most in writing the book, the thing that stepped on my toes the most was this chapter. And I just had heard this story of a professor at London School of Economics who used to talk about that we all have a leadership aroma. And he wasn't talking about you just worked out at the gym or whatever. He was from Calcutta, India. And he said the only time he got to go back home to visit relatives is during the summer. And he said, I don't know if you've ever been to Calcutta in the summer, but it's 105 degrees, 100% humidity. You don't feel like doing anything except lying around a house that has air conditioning in it. You're lethargic and no energy. And then he compared that to the time he got to teach one spring semester in France around Fontainebleau Forest, which I've never been to, and I probably botched that name too. But he says Fontainebleau Forest in the spring, it's like all the flowers are thriving and there's cool breeze in the air and blowing through the leaves of these beautiful trees. And he said, just have all this energy. You want to just go run through the forest and you're just energized and you're creative. And he says that, do you want to have a aroma, how you show up every day as Calcutta in the summer or Fontainebleau Forest in the spring, meaning that we do have an impact, how we show up. And that's, again, this is another one of those great messages. Be a receptionist. You can be clear bus tables at a restaurant. I mean, no matter what you're doing, how we show up matters and people notice it. And you can have that, smile, not inauthentic, but, be happy to see people, talk to them, engage with them. Or I find myself sometimes if I'm just going down the hall to get a cup of water, I can just be in my own head and my head down and just thinking so much and a scowl on my face. And that's giving off an aroma. Don't talk to Tim, he's kind of busy, but I want to be somebody who's welcoming and engaging. So it's really challenged me that every meeting, every interaction I'm having with someone else, how I show up really matters.
How you show up really matters. And a lot of our audience are new and emerging leaders.
Yeah.
And what they need to understand is that you want to model the behavior that you want from your team. And as a leader, you're always on stage. People are always looking to you for how you behave, how you react, how you respond, your body language. And that's all part of this leadership aroma.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And I love that idea of modeling the behavior that you want the rest of your team to be and see. But also if you're a team member, model the behavior you hope the rest of your teammates will model, right? I mean, you do have power, you do have influence. And so use it for good, right? I mentioned in the book this New Orleans priest, Brendan Manning, who said, in every interaction with somebody, we either give life or we take it. And that's just something that really encourages me to say, like you said, Damon, I mean, people watch how you show up and watch your interaction and listen to your words. And they take cues from it. So are you giving life-giving encouragement to someone, or are you really draining them? We all know those people that when their name shows up on our phone, we're like, oh gosh, not them again. What's going to, right? Well, we don't want to be that person. We want to be the person like, oh, this is going to be such an encouragement to talk to Damon or to Joe or to Sally, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, we just had our 30th anniversary at Learn It, and we had a big party, Tim. And one of the things that means so much to me is that people came up to me. Some are CTOs at Autodesk, some are CEOs of companies that they founded, and they just said, you gave me the encouragement, or maybe realized that I had more in me to become a great leader. And I think that that's really what's kept me going over all these years is like you're saying here, is like giving life, really.
Yeah. Well, and it's so good, Damon. It was interesting as the book got launched. I've had a couple people at our firm who I consider really incredible leaders who pulled me aside and said, I heard that story. I read that, in the book, but I want you to know that you did that for me. And I had like no clue. I had no remembrance of any particular, like I'm confident Bob didn't have that like aha moment of driving on I-65 to Montgomery. Like I just changed Tim's life, right? He was just trying to encourage me after he realized he shouldn't have yelled or whatever. So you're right. I mean, we don't know the impact and the power that a few words, a couple sentences could literally just encourage someone to step up and really accomplish all their ambitions and dreams.
What are a couple examples of a few words that can have that type of impact?
Well, I tell the story in the book a little bit about my, I've got a great nephew who was 5 at the time. We used to play this game where he would come run at me. He'd first get me down on my knees in his living room, and he'd come run at me and jump, and I was supposed to catch him. And he called himself Super David, like he was Superman. And over time, he started calling me Super Tim. And that really meant just come play with me this game, right? So I was, Super Tim's here. Okay, come on, get in the living room. But now, he's older now, and I can tell you it's 2 words, right? But every time I see David, and his sister Megan does the same thing, they see me, Super Tim, and they come run and give me a hug. I mean, I can go conquer the world with those 2 words, right? And so that's just one example. There's some other examples in the book where one of my favorite stories is a guy who was a high school coach, an assistant coach, didn't really know what he was going to do with his life. He was mowing grass to try to make some money, make ends meet. And he happened to cut the grass for someone who was a lawyer. And the lawyer was a little bit overwhelmed. It was a sole practitioner, and had him edit some documents for him. He said, hey, can you want to earn some extra money? Just edit these, not for the legalese, but just for well, apparently Justin, was able to do a good job. And the lawyer said, hey, you did a good job. I think you could be a lawyer someday. And he'd never thought about that at all. And it led him on a path where he did go to law school. And now he's general counsel of a huge healthcare company. And literally it was just a couple sentences of, you could be a lawyer, because they saw something in him, and they weren't making this up, but they saw something in him. So I think that's an encouragement to all of us, to me especially, like, how can I encourage somebody about what I see in them, their big characteristics, their traits, their talents that maybe they don't feel like they have, to go accomplish, a big, hairy, audacious goal or dream, and have the confidence to do it. So I think it's just, sometimes I think, I've got to schedule 2-hour block of time today to go encourage people. No, it's really how we show up every day, right? So.
Yeah, whether it's being curious or showing, gratitude or appreciation.
Yeah.
Very similar story for me is this woman who worked for me, Laurel Taylor, who's just awesome. And, one time we were going to lunch when she just got done out of grad school or whatever, came back. And I said, why haven't you started your own business yet? And she's like, you really think I could do it? And I said, absolutely. Now, I'm not taking any credit for her, like 2%. But she always kind of refers back to that. She said, you just put that thought in my mind, and now she's raised $50-60 million, and she's crushing student debt. And so I think, like you said right there, Tim, is very special what you said. It's like our responsibility as parents, as coaches, as just people in the community, is help people see greatness in them that maybe they don't even see in themselves.
Yeah. I'm sure, Damon, you had somebody that put that first idea in your head that you could write a book, right? Like I did too. Like, I think you've got a book in you. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe I never thought about that. Right. I mean, it's just, it's things like that can really help change the arc of somebody's life for the good.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And just like I've heard you say, is I basically say that to everybody now, when
I do too.
Right. It's like, hey, you got a book in you. And they're like, you really think so? I'm like, hey, if I can do it, you can do it, and it's a tremendous experience. We almost have to wrap up here pretty soon, but, you talked earlier about biographies, and one of the things I always do is I tell new leaders or any leaders, read as many biographies as possible.
Yeah.
In your book, one of my favorite guys of all time is Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
Absolutely, as a leader.
Right.
You talk about his dinner diplomacy, I think it is, as far as helping build a team. Can you share that one?
Yeah, it was a term that someone called it this. There's actually a book about around the same name called Dinner Table Diplomacy, and Churchill would get varying people around the dinner table. And people had different political views, different goals that they were trying to accomplish, world leaders. And he would get around the table, and his idea being that, like, around the table when he would do bourbon and smoke cigars and stuff, which is not necessarily my thing, but around the table, we do get to know each other. We get to know the more authentic self than if you're in a business meeting around some big conference table or whatever. And he used that a lot in trying to even accomplish things in World War II. I mean, he would come just show up at the White House with Franklin Delano Roosevelt to try to convince him to get let them have some weapons to fight in the war. So I took that idea because there's great examples of how he would get these world leaders around the table that had differing views, but had come out together on some consistent message or something they were going to accomplish together. I use that when I go to visit an office. We have 24 offices. I walk the halls. I enjoy doing that, but I really enjoy taking colleagues to breakfast, lunch, and dinner, sitting around the table, learning more about their families, their kids, their dreams, their setbacks, their obstacles they're having that maybe I can help get things out of the way. That they tend to be more open to trying to share things around food and drinks. And so I really have thought that that's just a great tip from Churchill about how to build those authentic relationships and really let your hair down. And I can talk about Disney World, which I love Disney, or we can talk about music, more sitting around a dinner table than maybe you do sitting, walking the halls so much. So.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you talked about earlier about being curious.
Yeah.
And if you're able to be curious, I mean, for instance, my wife drags me to all these events that I really don't want to go to. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to find ways to be more curious and learn about topics. And I think because of that, I've been a much more interesting person to talk to over the years. And it's helped hone my skills. You also have a podcast, Everybody Leads. Very unique name, for everything.
I'm not the most creative guy. I've got a podcast, I've got a book, I've got a nonprofit, all the same name, but
it's all the same name. But that's what's so cool about it is that, I'm sure I learn these days from being a host of a podcast and getting an opportunity to speak to guys like you. What have you learned from being a podcast host?
Oh, yeah, it's the exact same thing. I mean, it's really focused on talking to leaders and to learning about their leadership journey. And I really, like you, I just go into it with curiosity, and I've learned all kinds of things from these leaders. Some of them are with our firm clients, so there's a business development aspect of just kind of being close to our clients. But I've also talked to executive directors of nonprofits because I'm really curious about how people are impacting the world. And but I just go in and I'm literally taking notes vociferously through the interview because I just am learning so much by talking to people, and it gives me a framework to do it that's really not threatening, right? I tell everyone this is just like we're having a cup of coffee and talking about your leadership journey, and really, really great ideas and great thoughts that I've learned.
I probably drive my team members and my family nuts by talking about, well, I learned this from Tim today, and I'm going to implement this. And it goes back to tying into what you learned into actually leveraging it and using it. What is one more thing from your book that you can share with our listeners to help them become better leader of teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. One more thing. Well, I definitely think this may be counterintuitive. I think doing not taking yourself so serious. I talk in the book a lot about how it's important to have fun too. Now, we got very serious things we're doing, but how can we get outside of our comfort zone? And maybe it's going to an escape room together as a team, or maybe it's even just going to Topgolf together, or doing I think some people do ropes courses and stuff. I've not really done that, but I think it's just trying to get outside of the typical, structures of a business, the bricks and mortar, and try to be outside and let everyone just be themselves, and have fun. And as I said, I love Disney, so we're as apt to use a leadership principle from a Disney movie as we are from a Jim Collins book. But we make it applicable to what we're doing, and just try to have fun. Don't take yourself too seriously. Other than we obviously have to be serious. But I think insert some humor and fun, and just allow people to be themselves, be their authentic self, would be something that's helped me to get to really help motivate people to accomplish great things together.
I think, again, it goes back to modeling the behavior. If you can be your authentic self and be genuine and just kind of let your hair down in a professional manner, not do anything goofy, it opens the door for people to be their authentic self and not be afraid to admit when they've made mistakes and learn from those mistakes and share mistakes and grow. What do you want, fast forward 10 years, what do you want your legacy to be around this book and your time as CEO and chairman at Baker Donaldson?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm thinking some about those. I'm thinking about like what's Tim plus 5 years and Tim plus 10 years around the book. I hope it's just that there's some encouragement in there that people would have confidence to step up in the leader that they're created to be, they're called to be, and that there'd be practical tips in the book that they could implement to try to get better, today to lead themselves, and then as they grow their influence to lead others. So I'm hopeful just as a spark of encouragement, and really like a practical toolkit of things to start playing around with and seeing how that works, those ideas work in your journey. And then for the firm, I really hope the firm's in a better place than when I started this role. I want it to be set up for success. The legal profession is constantly evolving, as every business is, and it's a competitive environment. But we've been able to recruit and retain a lot of the best talent. And I just want to set it up that the folks who are just starting out their journey can have a multi-decade journey of success at Baker Donaldson, serving their clients with excellence as trusted advisors and building community with others around the firm. That would be really the legacy I would hope to lead, that I've helped individuals really see that they could accomplish great things in reaching their ambitions and their goals.
And where can our listeners connect with you at?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook, and then I'm at bakerdonaldson.com. And then I mentioned the nonprofit everybodyleads.org has a lot of leadership content on there. So I'd love to talk to people, and please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, you got to pick up Tim's book on Amazon or that Alabama bookstore that has the autographed copies, I think,
Yeah, alabamabooksmith.com. Yeah.
There you go. I'll put all these in show notes. And I was also going through your everybodyleads.org website, and I thought it was great. There's short little videos on there. There's little course lessons, and I think it's all great stuff. And so, listeners, what I want to challenge you to think about is, what are you doing to grow and get better right now? Tim's spoken a lot about like his daily habits, some of his disciplines. Reflect back. Do you have any of those? And if you don't, which ones can you start? Can you find 15 minutes to read? Can you become more curious when it comes to next time you're thrown into a party or something like that? Or is there somebody on your team that you can just share your gratitude with and your appreciation for them? So think about those and take action and do one of those today. And until next time, everybody, do me a favor, stay curious, keep learning. Have a great day. Tim, you're awesome, man. Thank you.
You too, Damon. Thank you.
If you're in a mission-driven organization like the Foundation Fighting Blindness, the mission is not just to raise $1 to hopefully do some good. The mission is to deliver treatments and cures